Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, designers, and dreamers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Have you ever been a few glasses of wine deep on a Friday night, scrolling Instagram deep in a cabin rabbit hole thinking, you know what would be a great idea? Buying our very own cabin escape. Well, that's exactly how Morgan from HeyFrame House started the process of purchasing her new build A-frame located on the beautiful Lake Hartwell in Livonia, Georgia. Morgan and her husband decided to contact the realtor and check it out and fell in love. 3 years and countless raving reviews later, they've shared their special place with hundreds of travelers and learned a lot along the way. Janice and Morgan sit down to talk changes in the rental market from the start of the pandemic, whether the new AirBNB updates have helped or hurt hosts, and compare the always controversial checkout instructions, and much more.
Well, I'm excited to connect, and I'm especially excited about the job titles that you shared with us because they sound very professional, official, and like you all have a lot on your plate in this cabin life of yours. Can you start by telling me about the CEO, the COO, and the CTO of your cabin?
Sure. So, yeah, I guess, um, my husband and I both, own the cabin and work on the cabin ourselves. And just kind of, we always joke about it that I'm like the CEO, we get tax benefits, right, for like women-owned businesses. So,
Oh,
but
that's
just,
smart.
I'm the one that ends up like, right.
Uh-huh.
But just like managing all the day-to-day is normally myself and interacting with everyone and posting on social media and all of that. And then he does all the hard stuff that I don't like doing, like getting up on ladders and chopping wood. And, he's my chief outdoor officer, as we like to call, and our chief tax officer, so he gets all those, all the other jobs. But yeah, we make a pretty good team. So
Does he love all of those things? And so this is a good split, or did he just end up with all those things because you're like, I'm not doing them?
that's a good question. There's most of them, I would say that he's good with and he likes them. Maybe not the tax part.
Fair enough. I don't know
That
anybody
he probably
aside.
just got stuck with.
Yeah. Nobody likes taxes except for accountants. And even them, when it comes to tax season, they're like, no, I don't like this.
Exactly.
Can you introduce us to your cabin, the name, where it is, but also like its personality, like what makes your cabin unique?
Yeah. So we own HeyFrame House, which is a newly built A-frame on Lake Hartwell. So Lake Hartwell is like the biggest lakes in the Southeast. It splits Georgia and South Carolina. And so we're on the Georgia side, like right before you cross the border. And our cabin is a little like, yeah, it's so funny listening to all these podcasts. You guys also talk about like your cabin fashion and your cabin style. And, it's like like ours is less, gosh, now I'm forgetting the brand. It's not, what's the clothing that you always wear at the
LL
cabin?
Bean?
LL Bean. There we go. I don't know why I was not Land's End, but it's less LL Bean,
No, it's
more
the
of like,
cooler older sister of Land's End.
it's like athleisure,
Yeah.
like all of it's a little bit bougie. It's definitely, I know a lot of people like wood. We actually have more wood at our house, I think, than our cabin. Just a little bit more, of like a bougie modern kind of version, still cozy.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
So we can't, I mean, we love it. We walked in, it was like, this is what we like. It's bright and airy. It's not as like dark, warm, cozy. It's just a different feel, but still looks like a cabin.
It's a little bit hard to get as cozy, I feel like, with an A-frame. Like it's hard to avoid the bright because those big windows on that wall and the high ceilings just naturally create a different feel. not a better or worse feel. It's just different than a small cabin by design, I feel like.
It is. And I mean, honestly, that's what I love about A-frames too, is you get the big open space. I mean, I know even the chalet, right? It's, it's got a lot more big walls and, yeah, just the open airy feeling with like a 30-foot ceiling is, I don't know, it's unique, and that's what we love about it.
How have you managed to fill the walls? Because that is a challenge that I've wondered. We've talked with Sean and Justin about this a little bit, but you have these giant walls that present this very distinct design challenge. Now, your place looks gorgeous. So you obviously, I think you did that yourself. So you clearly have a good sense of design. What have you done with those big walls? Any advice for other folks who have lots of walls that need to be filled?
So our walls, I mean, the crazy thing is I think that we have probably 4 or 5 pieces of artwork in the whole place.
Really?
But it's only because in an A-frame, all your walls are like this, right? You just hardly have any vertical space. So our vertical space is so little. We've just had to be super selective on what we put there. And, it's been less is more for now for us. Also just because I'm picking and I can't determine what I like. But what I think helps for us is that when, and we didn't build it, we actually bought it right after it was built. And so the original owners did a lot of the picking out of like the house build, and they did wood. So even though they're painted white on our ceiling, like on our slanted walls, it looks like shiplap. And so that helps us, I think, give a little bit more texture to the wall, to like a plain big piece of white drywall or anything, something that you have to paint, or that you're, like, oh gosh, should I put some sort of art on? But it's at least, it gives a little bit more visual interest. I've seen a lot of people too. There's other A-frames that'll do actually like wood on those walls, and that helps.
I do think the wood walls, though, present a design challenge when you have them on the big line, because one of the things that I learned from my designer that is a huge challenge for me, I love wood. I love the cabin feel. I think it warms up a space, but wood tones are nearly impossible to match. So when we were working on the cabin, I wanted wood everywhere. And Jordan, our designer, is so good at being like, no, you need to introduce a different color, a different material, because too much wood, like it has to be the same tones. They have to go together. And I've seen in a lot of cabins where you have like 4 different wood tones in a room, and that can be really problematic too. So having it painted white probably helped you in a design sense there too, because yours is like top notch in terms of appearance.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, no, I do agree that I think that that's a big challenge that I see as well in a lot of cabins that people will go redo. Because of course, you can't just have a cabin and then like never look to buy more and always scrolling on Zillow and everything, right?
Yes.
And I think that what people do a lot is like a lot of those older cabins or things where it's all wood, and then they'll put like a gray floor in there. So like a gray wood tone floor in there, and end up kind of, I think, clashing almost a little bit more than it would normally. So yeah, the white helps. And again, everyone's got their own opinions on having a bunch of white walls in a cabin, but to me, it definitely helps with breaking up all those wood tones. So we've got like several wood panel walls still. They're like a beautiful cedar color, a couple cedar beams along the white, and then we have like a super light wood floor. And then we still have like those medium tones a little bit in like the bathrooms and kitchen cabinets and stuff. So it's a good mix, I think.
Yeah. We definitely painted. So our lake house, it's called Cozy Camp Sebec. I'm telling you that only so you can find it on Instagram and see the amount of wood tones that we have that are contrasting. I think I counted up to 4 in the living room kitchen area when we bought it. It was like 4 distinctly different wood tones. Some were vinyl, some were actual wood, some were cabinets. And I just looked around and I was like, oh my God, Jordan, our designer, would hate this place. And so we some of them you can't remove though, right? Like the floors, if you buy a place that you're not building, the floors are really hard to remove. So we were like, what can we paint to remove at least 1 or 2 of these wood tones and create like some sort of consistency in the room? It's so hard when you buy versus build. Okay. So you said that you bought it already done, but on your Instagram, there's definitely some reno videos. So tell me what stage it was at when you bought it and how much you were able to put your own mark on it.
So we truly bought it like when it was completed. And We have, so we actually, when we bought it from the owners, one of the things that we liked was the cabin. We actually had found the house through Instagram. We'd been following them, and they ended up posting that they were selling. So the prior owners were the ones who actually posted all of like the construction videos and all of like everything being built. And they already had the name and everything. They posted on Instagram that they, unexpectedly had a baby during the build process. And, this was like late 2020, and housing prices were kind of starting to creep up. So they were like, it's a good time to sell. We think we're going to sell. And, my husband and I drank too much wine one day and basically said, let's just call the realtor, like, let's just go see it. Not going to buy it. We just want to feel it out, walk in. Cause we were like, maybe we'll build an A-frame in the North Carolina mountains. Like that's where my family's at. And, so after drinking a lot of wine and then the next day going to see it, it was already done. So it was, when we bought it, we asked if they would hand over like the name and the Instagram account as well, which they said, yeah, because they didn't have, a need for it at the time.
Right.
And so that's how so when we got it, it was definitely done. It wasn't, decorated in that, but it was completed.
So they had documented the build on Instagram, and that's what you were following. They hadn't hosted any guests or anything. It was just a build documentation.
Correct. Just the build. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Cause that's what I thought. In your pre-interview, you said you had bought it fully built, but I was like going back through your Instagram and I was like, it looks like they might've put some of the finishing touches on. So that makes sense that you got the Instagram from them. Okay. And you were following them.
So we get a ton of questions on like, what was the build process and all this? And I'm, it's just always like, I'm sorry, we're just not the original owners. We can't answer that. You can go back and look on videos and comments and stuff, but we just don't know. Thankfully, they're very friendly to us. So every time I'm like, by the way, what was this pink color?
In some ways, like, that's easy though. Your response can always be the same, whereas I have to decide constantly, do I have the energy to answer it today or
to respond?
Yeah,
exactly.
Because I hate leaving people ignored, but there's also just some days I work a full-time job and I manage 4 rental properties. So I'm just like, sometimes I just don't have the energy to share a paint color again, but we have reels for all of that. So I don't feel too bad, but at least you have that easy out of like, sorry, shrug. I don't know.
Sorry, we don't know.
Yeah. If you're dreaming about a cabin build or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. Where in the mountains where are you all located full-time? Are you in Georgia or North Carolina?
We're in Atlanta.
Okay, you're in Atlanta, but your family is in the mountains of North Carolina?
Well, so I have family that have a place like outside of Waynesville, and every single year growing up for Christmas, we would go to Waynesville and go to the mountains and have Christmas, and sometimes during summers. And it's just me and my brother growing up, and then my aunt and uncle had 4 kids. And so it was always just a big, giant mess. It's a big house, big mess. And it was the best time ever. And so I, really have always wanted a place because of course, they've grown, everyone's having kids. Mm-hmm. So lots of families, lots of full bedrooms. And so I would really want something. And I told my husband, okay, we're buying this lake house. It doesn't mean that we're not going to get a mountain house soon by my family at some point. Right.
Yeah.
And so that was just kind of always our thing. And we had been following them because they, built this A-frame and, used some certain plans. And we were like, well, maybe like we'll do that same kind of thing in North Carolina. But we live in Atlanta. Well, we've been here for like 4 years now.
Okay, what I find interesting about your cabin is that you bought it first and foremost for yourself and weren't planning to rent it initially. Tell me more about that. And at what point did that change? Did you all decide? And did you agree on it? Or like, how did that transition happen?
So we bought in, like, it was during COVID. It was fall COVID. I think we closed like the week of Thanksgiving in 2020. And at the time, my husband and I are both consultants now, so we travel all the time with work. And we were both completely remote, and it didn't necessarily, it looked like things might be this way for a while. And so, like I said, wine, everything, we found this house and we were like, maybe it's about an hour and a half away from Atlanta. And we were like, maybe there's a chance that we live there full time, right? I mean, of course, at the time too, you're thinking you're not really going out with people. You're not doing a whole lot in the city because things are closed. But also it's like, well, if we go to the airport, it's once a week. We're driving to and from the airport. It's not that bad. We don't really go into the office as much as we go more like to a client site. So, there was like thought that, maybe we would go ahead and move out there. And it was about, I think it was like 3 or 4 months in, and we had kind of been talking about it, and we're like, 'cause we were just renting at the time and we still had our townhouse in Atlanta. Also because storage at the A-frame is really lacking. So if we were going to do that, we were going to finish the basement out, actually have, I have way too many clothes, right? So we actually would have to have a place for all of that. And basically, we were there and just said, what if we had the opportunity to rent, and like, what would that look like? And could we make that work? And, it was kind of just starting to be like, well, we want to be maybe back in the city and closer to people again, things are opening up. And so, our goal really was, of course, at the time, like, can we afford it? Right? Like, what would that look like? And so that's essentially, we decided to try our hand at renting, which we had never done before. But our basically our goal was to break even and then have a place that we could use that would be paid for when it wasn't used. And so
did you all use Airbnb when you traveled? Like, did you have experience with Airbnb or other short-term rental platforms, or was it a totally new world to you?
We'd had a little bit of experience, and actually, funny enough, we'd only used Airbnb probably, a handful of times, like 3 or 4 times, mostly actually international. But I remember the very first time that we used it in Seattle, and it was really funny because here we left and we had no idea how Airbnb worked, and we didn't have notifications on our phone. And so we left, and all of a sudden, my husband's like, oh, wait, we were supposed to do all these things for checkout. Like, we did not do any of the checkout instructions. So we'd had a little bit of experience, but really not a lot. We've been thinking about like long-term rentals, but had never really dabbled into the short-term rental.
So it sounds like you had experience as a bad Airbnb guest before you had experience as a host.
A little.
Just a little.
Basically. Just, we just didn't really read things right, but yeah. We were the people that hosted.
Yeah. So what made you feel like when you talked about this, were you on the fence? Who was going to do the hosting? Did you think about the time that it would take? Was it purely driven by like, how can we pay for this? How did that turn into like hosting? Because it seems from your Instagram that you're pretty invested in the hosting side of it as well now, but like, how did that transition happen? And how did you learn?
It was kind of just, let's see, how do I even start? Well, first of all, how I learned, essentially when we did this, it was kind of like, let's give it a try, right? If something happens and, we have, our biggest fear, honestly, in the whole thing, like guests.
Say that one more time.
Bad guests,
okay.
Like, people breaking things or, because here, like, they did not build the house the cabin to be like renter friendly per se, right? I mean, if we would have built it, we probably would have done different floors, because the floor is beautiful. They're like an acacia wood, but they're not like great for renting, because like they kind of, if you drop something heavy, they can crack. Like it's not just scratching and denting, like, so
Yeah.
there was definitely like, I mean, it has a wood stove that's a little funky. You have extra steps involved with that. So it just wasn't necessarily built to be a rental. So because of that, I think that's what we were most worried about was, what if people mess this up? Because we are like, we love the home. We're there and it's like our getaway. It's so serene, right? And so that was our biggest fear, I think, going in. The rest of it, we were like, you know what, we'll figure this out.
Yeah.
Like, so basically, my husband started doing all of his all of his COO and CEO, right? Like all those types of tasks to get things ready. And I spent basically a ton of time just trying to talk to anyone that we knew that was renting. I joined all of the silly Facebook groups that I could with like Airbnb, VRBO, right? Just to try to research everything. And honestly, I mean, of course, like a lot of those groups, most of what gets posted are bad guests and whatnot, but it definitely, like, it really helped to sit there and read and like realize what people did and like the steps that they took to, one, be a good host, but two, but also just try to, mitigate risks as much as possible. So that's really kind of, I don't know, I think what, made us do it. And it was just a matter of, we never kind of thought that we would, because at the time we were renting, right? And so we didn't even have a house in Atlanta. We just finally got one like last month. And so we did not think that we would have, almost like second home people prior to even just getting a house here. But
although all the articles now are talking about how that's the new trend among millennials, is like the second house, short-term rental before the first house.
I know. And I guess I'm just another data point there.
Well, that's interesting. There's two pieces there I want to talk about. One of them is risk management, and one of them is the trends of and the amount of people buying into the short-term rental market exactly when you did in 2020, and what the last 3 years have looked like for you.
Hi guys, Sean here, host of Chalet. The dreaded mud season of Vermont is finally drying out, which means it's time for all the spring and summer activities you've been missing out on this winter. And what better place to stretch the legs and breathe in some green mountain air than southern Vermont? Let me share with you my usual routine when I pack a bag and head to the A for the weekend. First things first, roll the windows down and let the fresh air in. I don't know what it is, but for some reason you can feel and smell when you cross the Vermont state line from Massachusetts. What's a road trip without a coffee and a pastry though, so before you make the turn up the big hill into the farmland, pull over at Shelburne Falls Coffee. Next, enjoy the winding 2-lane drive up and over the mountain and through the small Vermont towns with a podcast or your favorite playlist on. If you're hungry, make a pit stop at American Flatbread in West Dover for a slice of za and some local Vermont beer. One final stop to grab a bottle of wine and some cheese and a few supplies at the general store, and 10 minutes later you're pulling off the paved road onto the gravel right away that leads you up to Chalet. With the car in park, I hop out with a big stretch, toss my bag inside, and kick back in one of the chairs on the deck to enjoy the last bit of sun before it sets. With some snacks and a glass of wine, I toss on my most recent audiobook and light the fire pit and let my mind wander as the sun sets before tucking into bed for the night. But by far, my favorite thing is to wake up early as the sun is rising and sit on the front deck with a hot cup of coffee as fog and dew burns off the grass and out of the woods. With the whole day ahead, it's just tough to decide between hiking, biking, paddling, fishing, or exploring by car all the fun spots we have just 10 minutes from the A. If this sounds like your kind of trip, hop on over to the booking link in the show notes or shoot us any questions you might have about the area. Okay, back to the show.
Let's start with the unsexy part, and that's risk management. What did you learn? Because I feel like this is the thing. I was talking to someone on a cabin consultation earlier today, and she just finished her build and is getting ready to host her first guest. And she was asking me all kinds of questions about liability and guests ruining her place, because that's the thing that her friends are bringing up to her. And I remember that when I first started renting, like the number one thing that everyone I knew who wasn't currently hosting or a landlord was bringing up to me was like, what if a guest does this and then sues you for all your money? And like all of these like worst case scenarios, which is also what you see on Facebook. What have you learned? What have you seen in these 3 years? What's the worst case scenario that's happened? And what are some of the things that you do for risk management to protect yourself that other people could learn from?
You know, it's funny because I mean, there's so many things. I'm sure I'm going to forget many of them. But you know, it's well, we have like I have like an ongoing list that I should actually really just write down. There's several things that, you know, just upon reading that I would start to take in and think about. And then, you know, I would talk to, we've got a couple of other friends that were thinking of starting this process as well. And so, you know, I would talk to them about it and they'd be like, you know, well, wow, I don't know. I never really thought about doing that. So, you know, well, first of all, cameras. So we actually had 3 cameras that were already set up by the prior owners for the property. And so initially we were like, well, okay, maybe we'll just keep like the doorbell camera and we'll take the other ones down. And again, for, you know, just kind of thinking about what people could or, you know, might do. So we ended up keeping all of them. It's like one overlooks our front door, the other is the back door, like the other point of entry. And then the other one we faced it a little differently, but like basically going down to the lake and overlooking our fire pit, because that's, again, biggest point of liability, right? Is like fire pit, which people do crazy things in the fire pit. But so I think cameras are big, which I know some people love cameras and don't want to stay in places that have those. And I mean, you know, I know that you guys have talked about that before on the show too. Things like, I think, so furniture was one of the really big things for me, like when picking out, you know, okay, what's going to look really good, because the place looked amazing as it was, but we, you know, I wanted to like try to do it in a way where if I can, you know, design it right and put the right furniture and stuff in there, right, it can market itself. You get good photos and all. So, but trying to pick out furniture that was like guest safe, wouldn't break as you know, or it could easily be cleaned. So like random things like our couch. So we've got a couch here. It's great. It's from Crate and Barrel. It's solid, but still when 2 people sit in the middle of it, like it sags in the middle. So buying a couch that has not 4 legs, but 6 was like randomly important to me.
Our couch has 4 legs. I would never have thought of that. I'm pulling up your Instagram now so I can just see pictures of the 6-legged couch.
It's just, well, and I mean, our couch isn't that big, but like my husband and I will sit on it together and we're like, okay, it's like sagging in the middle, you know? And so I was
and
just
Crate
like,
and Barrel, it wasn't cheap.
Oh no. And it's a super heavy piece of furniture. Our movers just moved it and they were like, why is this deceivingly heavy?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And yet it still sags.
so yeah. So, you know, things like that. The couch was velvet because velvet is super easy to clean, just with a damp, wet rag.
I would
again,
not
like
have known that. I was just going to ask you about the velvet couch because I have dogs and I wouldn't dream of buying velvet because it seems so hard to clean. Are you dog friendly or not?
So we are not animal friendly.
Okay. That helps.
Mainly because of our floors and like decor and stuff like that. I can't. But no, actually, so after that, like I want more velvet in my own house because we're cat people. I know we're like the anomaly with cabin people. But
no judgment.
I know it's okay. But it's actually like it's really easy to keep clean and the hair doesn't stick to it as much. They don't tend to claw it as like at all. Like again, damp rag and everything wipes off of it. Things like for rugs, the living room rug is one of just like it's a printed rug. It's not like a woven kind of, you know, high pile type rug. So just things that'll clean easier. Putting like our dining room table, anything that you know, our dining room table is a glass top table. And so, you know, people are like, there might be a couple scratches on it, but like You're not going to ruin it by setting glasses down on it or
Right.
anything.
You don't have to worry about
You know,
coasters and like that kind of stuff.
exactly.
I
You know,
can't even
so
find
if
your
you,
dining room table. I'm just seeing your badass island that it looks like everybody could sit there too. What material is
yeah,
that?
I think we've got like 5 bar stools. It's like a thick quartz waterfall island.
Yeah. Okay, guys, I know this
Amazing
is not a
decision
visual
by the
medium, but you
people.
should just look them up on Instagram so you can see these things. Oh, I see the dining room table now. Oh, that's really nice. I love how
Yeah.
your chairs don't all match each other.
Yeah, that was not actually initially intentional because it was a COVID chairs kept getting back ordered. So we had 4. I bought 2 more on Facebook. And then I kind of liked it. So I canceled the other crap. I was like, no, I don't need
I
it.
like it.
Like, I do too.
I like it a lot.
So
Risk
yeah, just
management.
things
Okay.
like that. Also like putting so not only do we have, like a smart lock on the front door, but we also have a smart lock on our, um, like on our owner closet door. And that way it's just like, say the cleaners forgot to put out extra like paper towels or toilet paper or something, or, something happens to where the guest is like, hey, I don't have this. And it's like, hey, I'll, unlock this for you for a bit. You can go in there. Also, though, you can see when people are trying to get in, because all of a sudden we'll get a notification that it's like 10 incorrect codes have been used.
Interesting. People are
Yeah,
just curious. For years before I ever owned a cabin, I would rent them with friends. And I do remember there being owners' closets and always being curious. And I remember that one time we rented one, and my boyfriend at the time was like big into music, and the stereo was off limits. And so he broke into the owner's closet and was able to access the stereo, which we used the entire weekend. And then he just like locked the closet up again. God, I was a horrible
yeah.
guest
I mean,
before I was a host.
but those things happen, and it's like, hey, we can try to prevent some of that. But also just like, even with that, I mean, as right, making a lot of cabins and also having a job, trying to also then mitigate risk by just thinking about what your guests might need. So like, like the one thing that I know is a big thing with Airbnb is people are like, oh, I provide a starter pack of the supplies that you need. So I'll give you like 2 dishwasher pods and, like 1 roll of toilet paper per bathroom or something, right? And it's like, I stuff like as much toilet paper as I can get under the sink. Like I give them a whole thing of dishwasher pods, and it's just the things of like people not having to reach out to you to ask for
Right.
stuff.
Right. But Morgan, I
Is
was that host. In our cabin in the mountains of North Carolina, when I first started, I knew nothing about hosting outside of my own house, which is totally different. And my cleaners were this old retired couple, and I put all this toilet paper out, and they were like texting me, and they're like, Janice, you can't do that. People are going to steal the toilet paper. And they convinced me this was a rampant problem in short-term rentals in Boone, North Carolina, was that people just would take off with all your toilet paper. So I was like, oh no, what should I do? And they're like, you just put out starters and tell them they have to bring your own. So I would put out starters of everything. And then just a couple of weeks ago, we were at an Airbnb in El Calafate in Patagonia. And literally there were 3 of us staying there for 2 nights, and we ran out of toilet paper. And I went to the bathroom the morning that we were about to leave, and I had 2 squares of toilet paper left. And I could not for the life of me find toilet paper anywhere in the house. And I was like, this shit is karma. This is payback for all the times that I put out only 1 roll of toilet paper. And I swore that I would never do that again. Luckily, I had abandoned that policy years ago, but
yeah, I was honestly worried about that too, like after reading all of that. And I was like, you know what? I think it's also just I think cabins are a little bit different. You're not catering to like a single night stay somewhere where people are coming and going and they're just kind of, on the road passing through. It's like, they're coming there for a different type of experience. And most people tend to be great. I mean, sometimes people will clear us out of all of our coffee and tea and like everything else, but that's that's kind of what it is. But
kind of
it
like
was
a
definitely
forest fire, though. You need that every once in a while because that coffee will build up. And before you know it, people are drinking bad coffee. So go ahead. If every couple of months someone wants to take all my coffee and tea and we just start over with fresh stuff, it's probably good.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about the rental trends because I started renting in 2014 in my house, and then 2016 in a cabin. So well before the 2020 point. But that's when like so many people that we've interviewed and so many people that I know from Instagram all came in 2020. And we're like super pumped about it. And I will say, like, I noticed in 2020 and 2021, we had the highest numbers we'd ever seen because people weren't traveling internationally and they could work from anywhere. They could school from anywhere. So like if you upgraded your internet, you could literally book. I mean, in Boone, I was booking every day of the month, which I'd never done in, the 4 or 5 years that we'd been hosting. But now in 2023, and even like later last year, I started to notice in Boone particular, those numbers dropping. And I'm curious how, because I think one, it's due to saturation, at least in my market. Every market is different, I think, but Boone was definitely a saturation thing, but also definitely our travel trends are changing. What have you noticed during your 3 years starting in COVID to where you are now?
Yeah, so we definitely have been noticing a slowdown. I mean, we were fully booked out, I would say, up until like late last year. Kind of at the beginning, right? I said, okay, well, we just wanted to break even. We get a lake house to use, like when we decided to rent, right? And then it was like, okay, we'll use it when it's not rented. And we were getting to the point where we were screwing ourselves out of being able to go once a month because it was like, well, dude, we're just completely booking. So, like 99% occupancy rate that, anything that we wouldn't block for ourselves, like would get booked.
Yep.
But then definitely like last year, I would say like December of 2021 was insane. High prices. I mean, we decorate for the holidays. And so, everything looks nice and it's pretty. And then last year, I mean, we had 4 bookings. It was basically like kind of through the holidays and stuff. And that was kind of it. And it was still, a very good month for us, like revenue wise, because we can charge more and especially like over the holidays, but it was just so much slower. And this year we're noticing too, like very last minute bookings. We kind of had initially, I mean, we've definitely raised our prices since we first started. And it was kind of this whole, like, I'm just going to keep raising prices kind of until people stop booking because, we're trying to get they say to hit like 80 to 90% occupancy, right, is kind of your ideal spot. And now it's to the point where, we're definitely backing down off of kind of what we had last year, just because people are changing. So, I do think it's a lot of, obviously, COVID. Everyone was kind of stuck inside. They were just driving places. And, now we see international travel opening back up. I mean, potential economy things I know as well. I think people are like waiting last minute, not doing as many things, in advance.
Yeah.
Yeah, aspiration for sure. And that's, so many people, we have so many friends now that are like, oh, I want to do an Airbnb too. I want to do an Airbnb too. And it's like, what I always say is like, I think that ours has done well. And I think we've continued to do well, but we are also a little, we're more unique. Like a lot of the places on our lake are just kind of, your average older kind of lake house that people had, and they're just like, I'm going to throw this on Airbnb.
Right.
And I'm not trying to like say anything bad about those. I mean, there's different models for everyone, right? If you just want to go to the lake trip, you're not going to rent our house because you can find, 200 other homes that are way less price that'll fit more people, that make more sense. But, so it's definitely, I think, yeah, it's so saturated now that it's hard. So, I mean, for the first time ever, like I've been like some discounts on our, on our nights, which I've never done before. So it's been interesting.
It's also interesting because you started saying like, if we can just cover our bills, that's great. Right. But then when you see what's possible, like, so you're definitely, it sounds like still covering your bills, but after you've seen what you could do in 2021, 2022, it feels like a letdown, even though you're probably still paying your bills and making some on top of that, but just comparatively, it feels different.
Well, of course. Yeah. It's definitely you saw this trajectory, right? If I can just keep raising prices, people are still booking, when is this gonna kind of stop? And I mean, I think it's obviously going to be a trend like that forever. but then, extra pressure buying a house now. And we're like, okay, we can't use it as often as we would like to anymore. Last year, third weekend, we blocked for ourselves, and we were very religious about going up there because, again, we love it. We bought it for ourselves. And this week, I mean, we are going up this weekend, and it's been like 8 weeks. I mean, that's the longest I think we've ever gone without going up there. And so that's challenging, but it's definitely just a little bit more pressure right now with, mortgage and a bunch of renovation that we're trying to do. So I think that's probably why we're more frustrated. But also, I mean, been so busy that like I haven't been posting on social media, and a lot of people find us through there. So
I was going to ask how you get most of your bookings, because you have, I think, like 20,000 followers. Is that right?
Yeah,
Something
about
close to that. Yeah. How much of your bookings comes from Instagram versus directly from Airbnb or other places? Because especially if you are a standout rental in that area, for some folks, it might be out of their price range or whatever, but how are you finding most people?
So it's a little hard to tell, only because, like we don't ask. And so it's mainly just like people will say that they found us through Instagram or not. But I think it's at least half through Instagram.
Okay.
And now I think it's probably a little more. And the reason why I say that, and honestly, part of the reason why I think for us bookings have gone down is I know, Airbnb with their last release that they did several months back, where, okay, we hear you customers, you want lower prices, you want less checkout, and I think with their algorithm, I mean, I will go into incognito mode a lot, and I'll like look for our listing, and it's so hard to find us. We half the time don't show up in like cabins, lakefront, any of the categories.
And
We
meanwhile,
are
your beautiful cabin, A-frame, clearly on the water.
A-frame, and it's like we don't show up in the categories. And then we used to like, even so on Airbnb, you get insights, and it'll be like first page impressions and all of that. And like it's way, way lower than it was before. And so again, I think that the way that Airbnb is prioritized listings is so much different now, that like now our bookings, it almost seems like is going to solely be from, Instagram, which is our real only social media. And so that's, when I slack, it's no good for us.
Yeah. But it's hard because social media is such a additional piece of the work on top of everything else you're doing to manage check in, check out, whatever, that like if something's going to get dropped, that is the one that impacts current guests the least. So I can totally relate that when I'm personally busy, if there's one thing that I'm going to let go, it's going to be social media, solely because my number one priority is always going to be guest experience, and social media does not change your guest experience. It just helps future guests find you and then enjoy the experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's tough. No, I was just gonna say, especially now with reels, because I mean, I know like you post so many reels and you do video like in your day life, like your day job and everything, right? And I'm just like I don't know. I could take a picture and post it and be fine, but like the videos and trying to find something to put it to, and I don't know, it's a lot of effort.
I know. I do enjoy it. It made it a lot more fun for me when I got to start doing that, but it also can make it a lot more time consuming depending on the reel that you're making. On our last episode with Orphe from Clapper Hollow Homes, one of the things that she talked about was the magic piece. And I love that her husband was always like, why would anyone want to stay here? Like, what's the magic? And I think when we talk about these rental trends and the saturation and the way that Americans are traveling differently, how do you think about the magic at your place, and what makes the stay at your place different than others?
I mean, this is tough, because I think for us, like it feels like home. And so, it's kind of just like when we go, we get to experience the magic of something that's feels like our home, but it's so well decorated and not a total mess like what we've been living in. But I don't know, I think to me, it's really the same. Like when I first walked into the home, like when we first stepped into that house, with the realtor, when they were selling it, there was just something about it. You walk down this hallway and you see this big wall of windows, and the way that our lot it's really steep. I mean, and I note that in our listing too, it's very steep. Like you will definitely get a workout walking back up to the house from the lake. Like you get some good glutes from it, right?
Added bonus.
right? But so because of that, we're on like big stilts in the back, and there's tons of trees. And during winter, you get a really nice view of the lake. During summer, it fills in more, but when you walk in, you almost feel like you're in a tree house, like you're in the canopy of the trees. You're not sitting down at the base and kind of looking at all these tree trunks. It's like you're looking at the leaves, you're looking at the birds. You just, with the big windows, you just feel like you're kind of immersed in, in your surroundings and nature. I mean, and we're not, off the beaten path per se, right? Like our lot's kind of small. Like we've got houses next to us. It's not like we're extremely isolated or anything, but the way that the house is set up, like you don't really see the neighbors. But so, you don't really see your neighbors at all. And so you just really feel you get to sit there and enjoy your surroundings. Like it's just so peaceful in the home. There's just something about it to where, I feel like walk in and see a little bougie, right? You get to stay kind of this nice, it's quartz counters and all, but it's so relaxing and peaceful. And I to me, it just feels like, to me, that's just what feels magical. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a huge camper, or, I don't love to I like to go in the woods and like look at it, but I don't really want to stay there with the bugs and all of that.
Fair enough.
And even the glamping, like I want a real toilet and I want like hot water, so it's just being able to like kind of feel that and be close, but also have everything that you need to make a great meal with a great bottle of wine is, to me, like what makes our place special.
This is what I'm hearing in terms of like some similarities of answers, is that it's really about the location first and foremost. You can do a lot of nice things with the cabin, and the cabin is certainly part of it, or the A-frame, but the actual location where it's located is the one thing that you can't really change and can make a world of difference.
It can. And I mean, that was the biggest thing, because when we walked in, we were like, okay, well, we don't really need to buy a house right now, especially not a lake house, but okay, well, what would it take if we wanted to build this somewhere else? And also the lot that it was on. I mean, you get a lot of times with these lakes, and not that there's anything wrong with it, but you'll get in like a little kind of cove or something, and you're looking at other homes and other docks. And where we are, we do have a lot of trees in between, like, it's Army Corps owned property, right? We can't take the trees down. We get things from guests, and they're like, "Oh, it would be nice if you like opened up the view and removed some trees." I'm like, "Yeah, I would."
Yeah,
I would get my dock revoked and like lose all rights to do that. But we don't have any across from us. It's all state-owned land. And so when you look, it's just so nice because you're not looking into other people's homes, truly just looking at a lake and trees, just scenery.
And
so
it's
that's
protected.
really what I love about it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't
I'm
know, I love
looking
it.
at I'm looking at your pictures on Instagram right now, and your place is so beautifully documented. But I looked through it earlier today to see what photographers you had hired, and it seems that you have taken most of these photos yourself. Is that a hobby, or how do you? Because a lot of these are like really good.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, like I think we've only had like one influencer stay at our place and take a bunch of photos, and honestly, mainly it's because like we don't have a drone, and I would love some drone pictures.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. My husband and I both like photography, and when I'm up there, I just try to take a bunch of photos, and it's just something that we've been into, and so we do a bunch ourselves. I don't know.
It's very impressive because I pay a lot of attention to the visual imagery just because that's what I do for a living. But also weirdly, I'm not very good at capturing my own cabin because that's just not what I capture typically in my day job.
Yeah, but I feel the same. I don't know. I feel that way too. I'm like, oh, my pictures are never as good as anyone's. Like we do need to get more people in and more photographers, but it's hard.
I'm looking at some of these trying to figure out like, oh, who do I need to hire? And like this one where there's a human in the kitchen area that's blurred. Did you do that?
Oh yeah, that's me.
I love that. It's so artistic. There's a bunch like that, and the Christmas tree reflecting in the mirror. That one's really
Oh yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, I love them. There's a lot of really good photography. Okay, we have 10 minutes
Well,
left, and I'm introducing a new segment to the podcast called Hot Topics. We've been doing a little bit of this, in case you've been listening, with what makes a cabin a cabin. So we're going to finish on that one. But I'm learning there's a lot of other hot topics in the cabin world, some of which you've already touched on. Cameras, for example, toilet paper, we touched on that. But I'm going to hit you up with just a couple more hot topics to see where you stand on them. I think I might know you stand on this one, but let's start with white walls.
I mean, I gotta say, yes, we got them.
Do you think they need artwork, or do you think that white walls stand on their own as like a clean, nice accent to a cabin?
I mean, I think it depends on the look that you're going for.
Good answer.
You know, I personally love, I'm a consultant. I always say it depends. Okay. That's like a thing. But I mean, if we had white walls that were straight, like more of the straight white walls, then I don't think that they would be as plain as they are. So, you know, I definitely think something visual needs to be there. But I mean, I love just the minimal look, and it really depends on the things that you put next to it. Like, are you going to put a really big, you know, plant next to it, faux or not? You know, I would love real plants, can't do that. Or like, you know, a big tree or something, or a bench, you know, things that in front that you may not need as much like actual artwork on the walls, but like visually you still have things that are kind of, you know, in front of it. Or like a good wallpaper. I would love to do a good wallpaper. So
Jordan, my designer, would agree with you on that one. She pushed me into wallpaper at my old house, and I was like, ooh, I was like, isn't that a thing our parents did? And then we all realized it was a bad idea. And she goes, no, they were using the wrong wallpaper. Wallpaper is back, and it can be good. And she was right. I loved the wallpaper we put in my old house.
I do too.
Yeah, it could be really good.
If you can find, there's actually, there's one of the Instagram accounts, I think it's A-Frame Dreams, and they make an A-frame wallpaper. They have an A-frame print that they put on like several things. And I've so badly wanted to get it, but I think the color, like the background color is slightly creamier than our wall. So it'd look great if it was against a wood wall, but ours will be against white. So it just won't quite go together.
Warm tones against cool tones, not always going to work. Yeah. Okay. Checkout procedures. How long is your list in your book?
I will pull this up. Ours is probably longer than most, but in all fairness, a lot of the things that we say are like, you know, if you move stuff around,
move it back. Shut
like
the windows if you've opened them.
Yeah, like, you know, shut and lock windows and doors. We have a smart TV. We don't provide, like, we just have one TV in the place, and we don't provide any cable or anything like that. So like we tell people to log out of their devices.
Okay, that's a good reminder, because I stayed somewhere this weekend and logged in and haven't logged out yet. So I should do that.
Yes, 100%. And we tell people that in their check-in. Our check-in is long. I will say that.
Wait,
but again, I'm about getting risks.
Like check-in message, or there's a check-in to-do list? The message. Okay. Mine is too. Yeah. I mean, my checkout list is long, so I'm not judging here. I'm just curious where you stand.
Yeah. Let's see. Load and start the dishwasher if you have dirty dishes that remain, because also, I mean, that takes like 3 hours. So, you know, place any used towels on the bathroom floor if they can. We do have take the kitchen trash out to the bin on the street and close the lid, because otherwise sometimes like we'll have a few days in between, you know, when a cleaner is going to come, and like if you have some cooked fish,
the whole place stinks.
Everything's like, oh my gosh, I know. One of them is like, so we have a kayak and paddle boards, and we have them kind of like a cord lock through that. So we ask people to like lock it back up, place everything on the dock back in the box. Yeah. Doors, windows, leave the home as you found it.
Yeah. Basically, you could just put that one, except that most people are forgetful. And we've had someone leave the bathroom ceiling thing open, and it stained, the water came in, it stained the ceiling, and we had to repaint the entire ceiling, because you can't just repaint one part, right? And so it's like small mistake where maybe a reminder in the guest book could have helped them remember to close it. I don't know.
I know. It's like, I hate to do that, but at the same time, I'd rather give more information than not.
Yeah. Okay. Last one. What do you think makes a cabin a cabin? And are all A-frames by default a cabin, or only some A-frames
Oh.
cabins?
Okay, that threw a little bit of a curveball in there. Some A-frames are not cabins, and I will say that because a lot of them that I've seen, and we stayed at this resort in Tulum. We went to Tulum last year, and they had these like A-frame villas, and it was a villa.
It was not a
Not a
cabin.
cabin.
What made
And
it
was,
not a cabin?
like, well, it was made out of like straw, and I don't. It would just is to me. It wasn't a cabin. Like all the resorts that are, these like villas with the pools. It's a different vibe. It's a villa resort vibe. It's not like a cabin vibe.
Okay.
So, I would make the argument not all A-frames are cabins, but it's hard. And I mean, listen to the podcast. So I've heard some of their answers, and it's tough. I think it's, kind of a feeling. I know that others, I remember one of the earlier episodes, I think was it Pete that helped like design your place.
Yeah.
At Cozy Rock. Oh, so he was like, well, I believe that cabins are like small, right? And they're more cozy and stuff. I mean, I guess I think back to like, again, going to North Carolina with my family, and they've got this cabin, and they've got 4 kids. And at the time, when they built, we went from a smaller cabin to a bigger cabin. And, by that time, the oldest kid was already having kids too. So, it's a pretty big space.
Like, do you build 8 cabins or one big one? Like our cabin in Boone is 2,600 square feet. And when Pete said that, I was literally sitting in that cabin and I was like, well, this is like literally by definition a log cabin, and I'm surrounded by wood. I don't know how to not classify this as a cabin, but it is 2,600 square feet. So like, I don't know if size is the criteria.
Yeah. So I think it's just all about kind of the feeling. And, because again, one of the other people said, well, or was it like, if you live in a place full time, can it be a cabin? Right. And, I think it still can. I think it's just a place that, when you're there, you have a feeling of warmth and a feeling of, like, to me, it's like warmth and love and nature kind of all on one. You don't have to be outside, in the nature, snowing or like, close to a ski resort thing, because we're not close to that. But, just being surrounded by those that you love in a place that just feels inviting, and, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be some wood in a cabin, I think.
Yeah, there's got to be some
wood somewhere. There's got to be some sort of like fire somewhere. Is it a fireplace inside a wood stove? Is it like outside? There's got to be some sort of fire, like fuzzy socks, hot chocolate.
That's right.
That's like cabin.
Wood, but not too much of the wrong wood tones. That's our takeaway.
Exactly.
Have some wood to make it a cabin, but just make sure it's the right wood tones and they all match each other. That's right.
Exactly.
Morgan, it was great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, no, thank you. It was so good to finally actually get to chat with you. I feel like I know you, and you probably don't feel the same about me, just because like you're always on stories for Cozy Rock, and you actually talk to the camera, and I feel like I already know you.
See, so maybe, okay, this is my biggest frustration with other cabins, and I totally get that it's not everyone's comfortable place. But whenever I follow a new cabin, if I don't know who the owner is, I just can't remember, like, there's so many of them out there, but the ones that put the owners on there are like cemented in my brain because I know the humans behind it. So just for anyone out there listening, put your face on the camera once in a while, mostly just so that I can get to know you. Yeah. Thank you for putting yourself on camera for us today. Just a friendly reminder that you can usually find these episodes over on YouTube. I say usually because Sean does the editing for the podcast and I do the editing for YouTube. So sometimes it doesn't get done, but usually you can find it over there. And thanks again for coming.
Thanks so much for listening. And if you like what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcasts and a review. If you have any suggestions for guests or feedback, you can always find us on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and the Chalet Frame, spelled CHALA. See you next week, and thanks for joining us.